This video is going to look at the hunger strikes and changing Republican strategy in the 1970s and early 80s. So, a bit of background to begin with. So, the British government tried many different strategies to solve or at least contain the Northern Ireland Troubles in the 1970s, and two policies in particular were created to try to deal with the Northern Ireland issue. The first was Ulsterisation. So this involved trying to reduce British soldiers in Northern Ireland and trying to replace them with locally recruited members of the UDR, the Ulster Defence Regiment, as well as the RUC, the police. It was hoped this would reduce British soldiers' deaths in the province. Criminalisation was the next policy and highly controversial in some sections. So Republican prisoners had been granted special category status. This is really important when understanding the hunger strikes. So they've been granted special category status before 1976, and this had allowed them certain privileges in prison. However, under criminalisation, special category status was to be removed and prisoners were to be treated as ordinary, common criminals. So the British government were going to spend a huge amount of money building a new prison, which was set up to house paramilitary prisoners in Northern Ireland, and it was called the Maze Prison, and it had specially designed H blocks to house and isolate prisoners. So what was the Republican reaction to this? Well, Republican prisoners and their supporters absolutely hated criminalisation and the removal of special category status. They regarded themselves as political prisoners, as prisoners of war, or as freedom fighters, and they set out on a series of campaigns to try to bring back special category status. So there's a number of different tactics they used to try to achieve this. The first was protests. So protests took place across Ireland and further afield across the world to try to highlight the issues and demand a return of special category status. Within the jails, though, there was this blanket protest, and many prisoners began to refuse to wear a prison uniform. They wore prison blankets instead and became known as the blanket men. Prisoners were punished for refusing to wear prison uniforms, so many of them were locked in their cells, and prisoners then refused to slop out. They refused to slop out their waste, so they instead smeared excrement all over the walls and refused to wash or clean their cells. This is known as the dirty protest, and this meant that prison warders would eventually have to hose down the cells. So there was also the provisional IRA tactic of actually targeting and killing prison officers and their families, and many were killed during this time. Then in 1980, with no concessions granted, some prisoners decided to take the ultimate protest, the hunger strike. So 7 Republican prisoners went on hunger strike at the same time. The hunger strike lasted 53 days and was only stopped because one prisoner was close to death, and the prisoners mistakenly believed that the British government were about to give in and give concessions. Then in 1981, the IRA commander in the Maze prison, Bobby Sands, called for another hunger strike, this time though with a difference. It would be a staggered hunger strike with a new volunteer going on hunger strike every week, and this would lead to a prolonged effect when prisoners neared death, maximising pressure on the British government. So they had 5 demands, which they aimed to be met by Margaret Thatcher. The right not to wear a prison uniform, the right not to do prison work, the right of free association of other prisoners, the right to organise their own education and recreation, and the right to one visit, one letter, and one parcel each week. The hunger strikers, though, faced a formidable British Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher. She was known for determination not to give in, and this would lead to a very long and deadly standoff. What transformed the whole hunger strikes was an event in 1981 when the local Fermanagh MP, Frank Maguire, died suddenly. This raised the prospect of a by-election for his seat, and it was decided that Bobby Sands would actually run in the election. He subsequently won the seat 40 days into his hunger strike, and this gained massive worldwide publicity and also showed the level of national support for the hunger strikers. 66 days into the hunger strike, Bobby Sands died. This gained worldwide publicity and put enormous pressure on the British government, who refused to grant concessions. Over 100,000 people attended his funeral, showing the level of national support at the time. 9 other hunger strikers would die over the next 3.5 months, with the British government refusing to concede. With no concessions after months of deaths, the families of the remaining hunger strikers, though, began to put pressure to call off the hunger strikes, and on the 3rd of October 1981, the hunger strikes were eventually called off. However, in a very choreographed move, several days after the announcement, it was announced that the British government were giving concessions on a number of things for prisoners. So prisoners would be allowed to wear their own clothes, prison visits would be allowed, prisoners had more freedom of association, and there was to be a reinstatement of 50% reduction of sentence, which had been lost previously. So there's a number of formidable results of the hunger strikes. So 10 hunger strikers died altogether. There was outrage amongst nationalists in Northern Ireland at the stubbornness of Margaret Thatcher and the British government in particular. Support for the Provisional IRA went up at this time, and there was an increase in violence. Over 60 people were killed. Protestants were really angry at the level of support for the hunger strikers, particularly amongst moderate Catholic neighbours. And support for Sinn Féin went up. Gerry Adams won the West Belfast seat in 1983, proving that the Bobby Sands victory was not a one-off. This made Sinn Féin then realise that the potential of politics to secure United Ireland. So they changed their strategy to one of an Armalite and ballot box. So basically using politics alongside an armed campaign to try to win a United Ireland. Support for the moderate SDLP, because Sinn Féin's went up while SDLP started to slide, and Unionists regarded the hunger strikers as terrorists. They were happy with Thatcher's stand against them, but angry whenever she eventually did seem to make concessions. Provisional IRA actually came very close to killing Margaret Thatcher in the Brighton bomb attack of 1984, when they targeted her specifically for a role in the hunger strikes. And because Sinn Féin is going up and the SDLP is going down in terms of support, the UK and Irish governments are very concerned about that. So this leads eventually to the signing of the 1985 Anglo-Irish Agreement, and you can find out more about that in the next video. Thanks very much for watching.